I hope everyone is doing well. We would like to thank those who sponsored this week's drasha. We'd like to thank Simi and Sammy Franco, sponsoring in honor of Bev Morris and Art Boyers, in gratitude for all they do for YISE and Eruv. Normally, revenge is discouraged, but when it comes to sponsorships, revenge is very much encouraged. We'd like to thank Debbie and Rabbi Barry Greengart, sponsoring in honor of their grandson Akiva Greengart's bar mitzvah. Mazel tov, they should have much nachas from all of their grandchildren, Kanai Nahara. I'd like to thank Chana and Joseph Hollander for sponsoring to commemorate the yortzeit of Chana's father, Chaim ben Yehuda Leib, Zichron Levracha, Misham Shev and Leah. I'd like to thank Eva and Isaac Moses for sponsoring in honor of the yortzeits of their grandparents, Leah Bas Shneur Zalman Halevi and Yitzchak ben Naftali, Zichron Levracha. The Neshama should have a Leos, thank you. I'd like to thank Lee and Craig Oppenheim for sponsoring to mark the yortzeit of Craig's father, Yaakov ben Herschel, on the 11th of Sivan, and Lee's mother, Chana Rezel Bas Avram Alevi, on the 16th of Sivan. Zichron Levracha, their Neshama should have a Leos, thank you. And no disrespect intended to any of the people who are having yortzeits this week, but I do want to say I personally remember Craig's father, and I've certainly fond memories of him. The Parsha begins on a very technical point. Last week's Parsha was a count of the 12 tribes of Bnei Yisrael, not counting the tribe of Levi, and the tribe of Levi were dealt with separately. And then the Parsha at the very end of last week's Parsha had a specific count for the family of Kahas, which was one of the branches of the family of Levi, but unlike the general counting of the other tribes, each tribe separately was age 20 and up. For this counting of Kahas, it was age 30 to age 50. And our Parsha begins with a counting of the family of Gershon, which was another branch of Levi's family, also from 30 to 50, and the family of Merari, which was yet another branch of the Levi family, also from 30 to 50. And the significance of counting the Levium from 30 to 50 is we're specifically focusing in on the age range for which these men would serve in the Mishkan. Okay, and because they have this important service, Sheva Levi in general has this important service, and it's important to understand how many people are available for the different avodos of the Mishkan, the different tasks of the Mishkan. This specific age range is counted by branch of the family because each branch of the family was given its own task. Very technical point. The pasuk begins, the second pasuk of the parsha, Naso es rosh b'nei Gershon gamhem. Count the head of the family of Gershon, the heads of the family of Gershon, also they, gamhem, also they. Now that it's a very strange thing. Rashi explains the reason it says gamhem is it's a follow-up from last parsha. The parsha last week ended off with a count of the family of Kahas within Levi from ages 30 to 50. So now we say, by the way, Gershon too, from 30 to 50. The question is an obvious question. Why does it have to say them also? It's obvious in context. You told me last parsha to count Kahas. Now you told me to count Gershon. There's a lot of different ideas said by commentators from throughout the generations about this. I wanted to share with you an idea I saw from Moshe Feinstein that I found very moving. So we just said that the reason why the tribe of Levi in this counting, there was an earlier counting with another age range, but the reason why the tribe of Levi is counted aged 30 to 50 is to specifically focus on those that would have specific tasks in the Mishkan. The family that we ended off last week's parsha with, the family of Kahas, the Torah describes their task as Kodesh HaKadoshim, the holiest of tasks. They carried the vessels from the most sacred part of the Mishkan. They carried the Aron, the Ark. They carried the Shulchan, the table. They carried the menorah, and so on and so forth. So a person might say, wow, Kahas, they have an important job, really important job. And therefore, the specific subsection and the specific age group in the subsection that will have that task, they need to be counted separately. You know what Gershon carried? Gershon basically carried curtains and other cover type of things. It wasn't a particularly physically demanding task, By the way, the next family, Merari, carried boards and the like. It wasn't a particularly physically demanding task, and to be candid, relative to other aspects of the Mishkan, it doesn't seem particularly important. I mean, it's important because everything is important, but it doesn't seem particularly important. So Reb Feinstein says that's why it says Gamhem. Them also. There's an emphasis, them also. Everyone needs to know, but they particularly need to know that they have an important job too. They have an important task too. And it's a very, very basic idea, but it's a very powerful thing to think about in all of our lives. We have a habit of looking at the people or the roles that seem to be quote unquote important. And then there are the rest of us. And how much of a difference can we really make already? The point, according to Rav Moshe, is that the emphasis of Gam Haim is everyone. Each and every one of us has to see our roles in this world as important, as vital. We're all serving in the world, which is God's temple, so to say. We all have important tasks. The only way it would turn out that we can't accomplish relevant things in this world, significant things in this world, is if we don't believe in our potential to accomplish. The truth is, I was very moved by this idea because I was thinking about this idea this week. The terrible, terrible story of the story with the police and George Floyd in Minnesota, the terrible story, the terrible tragedy that it is, the disturbing story, the terrible feelings that are sprouting up all over our country because of this, understandably sprouting up because of this terrible story. Let's just do a mental exercise for a moment. If I were to ask you to rank from top to bottom all of the important officials and government representatives in the state of Minnesota, starting from the governor on down. So any of these 4 police officers that were there with Mr. Floyd, where do you think they fall on the list? I can't imagine they'd be very high on the list. If one of them would have acted differently, whether it be the individual who actually killed him, whether it be any of the other people standing around, would have asserted themselves. Imagine if one of those other people would have asserted themselves more and would have stopped this from happening. Could you imagine how much of a difference that individual would have made in the world? Certainly in our country. Not just in that city, not just in that state, in our country. Isn't that an amazing thing to think about? Let's say there was a person walking around this world, Eliyahu Hanavi. Let's say Eliyahu Hanavi. Let's say one of these 3 bystander police officers would have stopped the fellow who killed Mr. Floyd. And someone would have come up to him and said, "You saved the United States of America so much crisis, so much turmoil, so much death. And we thank you." The person wouldn't know what you were talking about. They're just doing their job. Isn't that an interesting thing to think about? Who knows how many of us at any given moment are doing what we're supposed to be doing. And because we're just going about our normal lives, we could be making remarkable impact on the people around us. It could be in avoiding the negative, like this terrible story. It could be in a positive way. I'll give you just another exercise to reflect on for a moment. Think to yourself make a list of the 10 people who have impacted you most in your life. And it's an interesting thing to think about. I'm not even sure what my list would be. There are some names that come to mind immediately, but 10 is actually a decent number. So wonder to yourself, how many of these people are the big and famous people? Yes, it's possible that many of us have had interactions, whether it be in a religious setting, whether it be in a professional setting, whether it be in an academic setting, with world famous individuals, world class individuals. It's distinctly possible. But my guess is that many of us, and even those of us very successful in their areas and fields in all kinds of ways, that many of us, if we really thought about it, would come up with an elementary school teacher, would come up with some cousin, some aunt, some uncle who said a nice word at some point, might even come up with some classmate from high school. Who knows? So isn't that a musar? Isn't that a lesson for us? So if people have impacted us in that way, can't we believe in our own capacity to make a difference in this world? Not just to not mess up, but to do positive things, to make a Kiddush Hashem, to sanctify God's name. Excuse me. I don't recommend you saying amen to the bracha, but I just heard thunder, excuse me. We have the capacity to inspire people. We have the capacity to teach people. We have the capacity to give someone a good word. How many times in our own lives have we been having terribly difficult days and someone just says something nice to us and it puts us in a whole different place? We have to believe in our own abilities to do that. This idea of the remarkable ability that each and every one of us has to really make a difference, even if we're not the one in such a position or the most talented or the most popular, it's so on and so forth, really comes out from the end of the Parsha too. There's a famous question at the end of the Parsha. End of the Parsha discusses the dedication of the Mishkan. And each of the head of each tribe came and brought a unique offering. There was a series of days where the head of each tribe would bring an offering on behalf of the tribe to the Mishkan. And it's remarkable because each one of them brought the exact same thing. And what's more remarkable than that is the Torah goes to great detail to go through all the psukim of what each and every one of them brought. It would have been very easy to have the first one who brings go through the detail of what he brought and then say, and everyone else brought the same thing. We don't. For each person, it goes through in great detail what they brought. And there are different answers in the Rishonim to this question about why the Torah would go through in such detail. And then, by the way, after the Torah goes through in such detail, the Torah says the sum totals of all these gifts. And one of the classic answers cited by different Rishonim is that the message is that God is teaching us how much he values each and every one of these gifts. And one would think that each head of tribe would sit there and say, you know, this would have been nice if I would have been the only one bringing it. But I'm not the only one bringing it. Everybody is bringing the same thing. What does God need from this even? But the reason why, and we talk so much, the Torah doesn't waste any letters, the Torah doesn't waste any words. The reason why the Torah goes to great length with all these psukim is to show how valued each and every one is. So that's a powerful thing to think about. We don't have to be different than the person next to us in shul. We just have to be us. And even if all of us are just doing our thing, davening and learning and being kind and smiling at people in the street, Hashem has nachas from each and every one of us. And if even one of us wouldn't be doing our thing, then there would be a void there. So whether it be from the Gamheim at the beginning of the Parsha, whether it be from the detail of the Nesiim's offerings at the end of the Parsha, whether it be from thinking about positive stories in our lives, whether it be from thinking about the very tragic story from last weekend, heaven forbid that any of us should ever underestimate our ability to really make a difference in our community and world, and to really, really bring tremendous nachas ruach, tremendous pleasure to our Father in heaven. Have a wonderful Shabbos.